What does material participation
Mean to
do?
you?
What does it mean to you? How do you like to think of material
How
participation?
does it make you feel?
It's like a 7 pound, 6 ounce, sweet little baby. Material participation.
Nah, exactly. So we want to talk about material participation because we're constantly talking about this.
Yep.
Why it's important, how it applies, how we actually apply it to our real life investments, not just what it means in the IRS code and how it's stated there.
Right.
I guess.
Right. There's 7 tests, and we've gone over all of them previous video. But
right
now is how do we actually put this into practice? How do we actually make use of what that is? How do we make sure that we're compliant?
Yeah, we were talking earlier today about basically like what is the main purpose? What is the point behind material participation? Right, we're using like IRS jargon, but like what is the point? What is the point that they're driving home about meeting this requirement within our rental properties? And it's really just it's making these things a real trade or business that you are actively engaging with. It's not a passive investment. So I just want to distinguish the difference between the two. It seems like that's the big thing.
Yeah, a lot of people get into kind of any investment with the intent of collecting cash passively. Like there's a lot of people that get into any sort of whatever, buy equity in a business or purchase real estate or buy stocks. And it's really inviting and really nice to just collect cash, right? With material participation, kind of the entire point is to say, all right, but what are you doing to make this active? The benefits of flipping rental real estate from passive to active are staggering. They're massive, right? We have huge tax benefits making that flip. And this is the IRS saying, all right, well, how are you making it active though? Like, what are you doing to make this an active business, not just take advantage of code, but like, what are you doing to actively flip this into a business, not just a passive stake in an investment?
Right. And to preface this as well, like for anybody listening, the major reason why you would ever want to materially participate in your portfolio, your rental portfolio, is really one of two reasons. You're running one of two strategies. You own a short-term rental and you're going to keep those guests staying under 7 days on average. And basically what you're telling the IRS is this is an active business. It's much more than just a rental property. Or you qualify as a real estate professional. So we qualify as real estate professionals. We are real estate agents. We broker real estate, but you can also qualify in several other distinctions. And we help clients who particularly qualify as a real estate professional because they're in the reconstruction and construction industry.
Right. And they're making good money in that business, right? Like the point of this is how can I find an asset that can be depreciated, that can show paper losses to take against my other income, right? I have losses in this income generating thing, this asset that is a rental. How do I show those losses? Those are real losses. Those are like within the code and within what the IRS allows. But how do I take those and allow those to be shown against the money I'm making in my company? Like if I run a successful business in HVAC and I'll pull $10 million a year and I'm taking home $600,000, $700,000 in a year, I don't want to pay taxes on that $700,000. Yeah, that's a big deal. And if I'm paying myself that much through the company, I'm taking a pretty big hit in that I'm going to be paying larger taxes on that upper dollar, right? Yeah. A big portion of it. So a large chunk of that ends up going to the IRS, and it's like, well, I made all that money, I put in all that work, I want that money. I want to keep that money.
I think where this too takes my head a lot of times is like you go back to that investing principle of like invest in things that you know and understand. And so for me, when we're talking with people who are in the reconstruction space, it's like, dude, you're dealing with homes every day. Yeah. You're in and out, you're dealing with homeowners, you're dealing with construction trades, you're dealing with a lot of like the components of what it would take to, be successful in investing in real estate. And so for me, it's like, okay, if this is an avenue, if you have all these choices, right, of different investments that you could make, there's other places where you can park your money and invest in. But if this is an option that you know and understand because you're in the reconstruction and construction space already, like you're at an advantage. Like you should be putting money into real estate. You are in the industry. You are a real estate professional by the definition given by the IRS. So I think it makes a lot of sense for people to just be aligned with, because as a business owner, you're already juggling 10 different hats and plates, and you're already trying to think through a bunch of different stuff. And so it's better to just keep your investment strategy simple, straight to the point, something that you can follow, something that you believe in, something that you're already involved with and have experience and knowledge around,
right?
And not over convolute the entire strategy.
Yeah. My 12, 13 years in the HVAC industry gave me a lot of experience in how a house is put together and how to fix holes in walls and punch holes through. There's a lot of holes involved. Punch holes through through foundation walls and all sorts of stuff. Install furnaces and air conditioners. It gave me a lot of experience with how a house is built. It didn't give me a lot of experience with how the blockchain works. Right? Like I have no idea how crypto works. I know there's servers involved and electricity involved and something about microtransactions. I don't know anything about it, but what I do know, and then back to the invest in what you know, what I do know is housing. I do know how houses are put together. I do know how they're built. And it's just like proof of, hey, the people that are in the construction space, the people that are in the construction, reconstruction, development space, the IRS considers them real estate professionals if they do that full time. More than half of their time, more than 750 hours, they're actually actively participating in the business.
Right.
They own the business that they're talking about. That person who is that heavy in the construction space is a real estate professional.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about material participation. So if you're running a strategy like this, it's because you qualify as a real estate pro, just like we went over, or you're running a STR loophole strategy. Either one of those, you're going to need to materially participate. Right. By the definition of by the IRS on that. So let's go. Well, we went over in a different video, like exactly what those specifications are. Really, you're going to meet like 3 tests. You're either going to participate 500 hours in your rental portfolio. So across one or multiple properties that you own, 500 hours. You're going to, that's one way you qualify for materially participating. The other way would be you are meeting a minimum threshold of 100 hours. You would need more than 100 hours, and it has to be more than anybody else.
Right.
And then it has to be more than anybody else. Did we
at least as much as anyone else?
At least as much as
anyone else.
Yep. Which was an interesting little piece there, because a lot of times you'll see people say it's got to be more than everybody else.
I've read it that way.
Is slightly different. So it opens up some different conversations around, like, could you own a property with a business, with a partner? Could you technically both qualify if you hit the exact same material participation down to the minute, right? Like, it'd be kind of weird and hard to track, and we wouldn't recommend it, I don't think. But
it'd be stupid to try and hit, like, all right, let's press stop at exactly the same time and stop. We're done. Right. Technically, it would probably, if it came down to an audit, it would probably be found that one person put in more work than the other person, and they wouldn't qualify. So one person's screwed, just whoever the IRS thinks did it right. Right.
So we kind of touched on the main point of material participation, what you're trying to essentially prove to the IRS. In terms of like real world application, what sort of tasks actually count? That's like the next question. That's right. My brain is always racking. Okay, like, well, what does this actually look like in a 12-month period? What am I going to log that counts towards the, let's just say, 100 hours?
Exactly.
And so we want to talk a little bit about that list here. Do you have that? You're pulling that up?
Yeah, I'll pull it up now. Okay. I think one thing that I've listened to stupid amounts of podcasts, and the one thing I hear repeated over and over and over again in relation to business owners and whether or not a business expense is deductible, is a write-off, is counted as a write-off for the business, is you gotta say, is this thing ordinary and necessary, right? Is it normal as an expense? Is it normal to other people who also run this type of business? Is it normal? Is it ordinary and necessary? And I think I've heard similarly regarding material participation. Is it necessary to the day-to-day operation of the business, of the rental business? And that's a really big question. Like if it's not necessary that I do this thing, it probably doesn't count towards material participation. So if I am looking up comps on my rental house and tracking it in a chart, and I got my spreadsheet and I'm nerding out and I got all this cool stuff. I spend hours on that because that's what I do. It's stupid stuff I enjoy. That's just investor level stuff. And IRS specifically says, hey, investor level hours don't count towards this.
Right.
It's not necessary to the day-to-day operation. Me doing that has no bearing on whether or not it's going to perform well. Or it's going to do better than it did last month. It's just me acknowledging how it did. It's looking back at a thing. So it's not necessary to the day-to-day operation.
Yeah. And we had a conversation earlier this morning that was about really like the reason for me putting in these 100 hours. I want to make sure that I'm optimizing those hours in terms of what is really adding value to my asset. So if I'm going to be self-managing my property, let's just say I own a long-term rental, right? And I'm putting in a tenant there. So I buy the property this year. I'm going to go ahead and spend the first 2 weekends, most likely, right? Cleaning and getting it ready to rent. And then I'm going to spend probably like 2 10-hour days just cleaning, prepping the whole thing, yard work, repainting, touch-ups, just getting it ready, right? For a tenant. Spend the whole weekend probably doing that. And then the following weekend, I'm probably going to be setting up staging and taking photos and getting ready to like actually market the property for rent. So like that matters. That is me executing in the business. Like that's a key role for me, getting that thing rented and making money. Right. So I would count those hours.
But think that through. You've got marketing of the property, right? Go to a Schedule E in regards to business losses and gains, right? Marketing is a line item. It's one of those things that are like, oh, this counts. This is a cost that has been incurred in the business,
right?
And so it's part of the business. What we're doing is proving the time that we're spending in the business of rental real estate.
Yeah. And then you take that the next step, right? And it's like, okay, I'm getting ready to rent the property out. Well, I'm spending time obviously fielding phone calls, texts, anything like that from potential tenants. That's going to count. Like I'm working my way through figuring out who's going to be the renter in this place. And then from there, like once I do find somebody who fits the mold, I'm going to spend time crafting the agreement, the lease agreement, making sure that everything's filled out correctly, making sure that they have all their answers to their, like all the answers to their questions, all their questions answered, is what I was trying to say. But and that's going to take time, right? And so you might have, when you first buy a property in year one, you might have 50 hours right there, and just in terms of like prepping, and that might be in the first 3 to 4 weeks of you owning the property. And so the additional 50 hours, it's like you've got the list pulled up right now, but like what do we include for let's just say the additional 50 hours there?
Right. I want to touch on too, like the time that you spend at the front end. Sure, it can take some time. It can take excess time, more than it would normally halfway through the process. Maybe the front end, the first time you rent it, it's taken extra time. If we start getting to where it's like, all right, it took us 10 hours to I don't know, fix a faucet or something. It's like, okay, well, back to the question of, is it ordinary and necessary? Is it reasonable? Your time, like watching YouTube videos on how to fix a sink and taking 7 trips to Home Depot or whatever box store you go to find the tools and stuff you need. That's not ordinary. That's not what it would normally take to do that stuff.
Right.
So common sense on, hey, this isn't it's because you're slow. It's because you're kind of dumb when it comes to plumbing, and you didn't know.
A good question in my head that was ringing when you were talking about that would be like, would I pay someone by the hour to do this thing that I'm doing? And you probably, right. Like so you need to be careful about what you're technically counting in there. In the same capacity, like we're headed to an ASREA meeting on Monday, and it's education about assisted living centers. And so that's an investor level
Yeah.
That does not count towards my material participation. Even if I'm planning on opening an assisted living center, or if I own an assisted living center already and I'm looking to optimize it, that doesn't count. Like, that's not me actually spending time in the business doing a thing that's bringing cash, right?
Yeah. There's several tax court cases that specifically talk about investor level stuff that doesn't count, or education and training stuff that doesn't count. So it's just like pretty specific that those hours won't count. That time doesn't count. That networking event that you went to won't count towards that time.
Yeah. Okay. So you get the list.
Yeah. What does? Showing the property, taking tenant applications, screening tenants. We talked about preparing and negotiating leases, cleaning and preparing for rent.
I got a good one that popped into my mind. Like, no one's stopping you, even if you don't hold like a real estate license. Nobody's stopping you from like holding an open house on your rental property. Yep. That would be a weird thing to do, maybe, but also like I'm just curious. I'm just throwing that one off the top of my head. Would that count, right? Like, I'm sitting in the property, I'm trying to attract buyers. Maybe I've put out some ads and stuff saying, hey, it's going to be an open house from, I don't know, 10 to 2 on Saturday.
Right.
Come by, stop by. We'll be here. I wonder if that counts.
I've never seen that. So the question would be, is it ordinary? Like, is it ordinary necessary?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know that literally everything that other people don't do, every like unorthodox thing that you do doesn't count, but I would question that. Maybe.
Yeah. Good question for a CPA.
Interesting. Repairs that you do count towards that. Improvements, you swing by, twice a year for upkeep and landscaping type stuff. These are things that, like, if you are trying to keep the entire asset as passive and I'm just collecting cash flow as I go, I'm going to eventually sell and take the appreciation. I don't need to. I hire this stuff out to somebody, right? I hire landscapers, I hire cleaners, I hire painters, I hire all that. But if we're talking about trying to prove that I'm participating in the business of the rental real estate, then doing some portion of these is going to be necessary.
Yeah.
The IRS says, hey, I just need you to prove that you're actually doing work here. You're not just taking a deduction. Like, you're not just writing all this off as a loss. You're actually doing the work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, advertisements, eviction process, collecting rents. A lot of rents are collected electronically. You don't spend time doing that. Like, if I'm driving to a location and picking up a physical check, I'm doing myself and my renter a disservice. So it seems like a waste of time. And I think we're getting to where that's not ordinary or necessary.
Yeah.
And
well, and what to your point right there, like, we shouldn't fill your time log with things that are unnecessary for keeping this property profitable and run well.
Right.
Like, spend your time doing spend your time doing things that improve the property, improve your service to the tenant, improve the feedback and communication. Like, don't spend your time driving and picking up a rent check. That does nothing for nobody, and it is weird.
Super weird.
So just run a property management software and like have an online portal where they auto draws from their account and they can make the payment easily. Like, that's super easy thing to set up at this point where we are with technology. That should be a normal thing.
Yeah.
And it's preferred by your tenant and you. So like, spend your time doing other things. Like, what tasks would you be doing to the property to essentially bulletproof it, right? Like, you're trying to do things that increase the value. You're trying to do things that increase the longevity of that tenant staying there. You're trying to increase the lifespan of your property. Like, are you keeping up regular maintenance? Are you doing those things? So like, the things that you're spending time doing are good for, like, you're running a good business. You're not just like wasting time to hit a rule in the IRS code. Like, shift your perspective, shift your mindset from, I am trying to fill my hourly log with a bunch of BS hours, right? That's not going to lead anywhere good. Shift your mindset to like, I'm doing things that are actually positively impacting the property and the tenants in the property.
Yeah, we talk about the rental real estate being your vehicle for investment, right? And it's a place that it's an asset class that you know about the building and construction, you know how the house is set up, you know how to keep it, keep the upkeep. The rental side of that, if you can kind of get good at the rental side of that and get practiced at the rental side of that, all the efficiencies that you learn in that, you're going to be able to then use later. Let's say I want to become passive later on in life. I want to like turn this over to property management later on in life when I don't have a tax problem I'm trying to address. I know what to look for. I know a few of the things like, hey, this is super inefficient and they're doing it weird and they're charging me way too much. And you just have more ammo to go in with, knowing, hey, I've got a knowledge of how this is done, and I don't like the way you're doing it, so I'm gonna go over here instead. Could be helpful. I think more so though, it gives you the control of the asset, right? Like it gives you more control over how well that rental is going to do in the market. If you're spending time getting good at being a good landlord, not just being one of the guys that is hands off entirely, and the only time they show up is when there's an absolute emergency and you can't get them to come over at all for any sort of normal maintenance or repairs, and you got to pester them. That's what everybody else is, and that's what everybody's used to as renters, right? All renters are used to just getting no response from the landlords. If you can get better at solidifying your abilities as a landlord, at creating a space where like tenants want to hang out, tenants want to live, and not some weird like I want to hang out with you and have a barbecue this weekend, but like it's a symbiotic sort of relationship, right? Like you are providing something for them, they're providing something for you, and you want that to work out. It is a relationship that you need to foster, you need to get better at, you need to grow. And in the end, you're going to end up having longer tenant time, right? They're going to hang out longer. They're going to want to be there. And they might be okay with paying a little bit extra for what they get out of that relationship because they've been in the rental that doesn't do any of that.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like let's say real life example, you're going to go ahead and schedule a quarterly check-in with your rental property where you're going to go there on a Saturday or whatever, and you're going to walk the property with the tenant. You're going to spend an hour, 2 hours maybe there. You're just going to walk the property with the tenant, take inventory of any complaints or any like weird little repairs that they need or that they've thought down or jotted down. And you're just going to take inventory and see what maybe you can fix on the spot or what you can schedule out then over the next, couple of weeks for yourself to go ahead and just take care of. When you do that on a quarterly basis, every 3 months, and you've had a touch point with your tenants 4 times throughout the year, when you do raise the market rent the next year, when you re-up a lease, they're not like, why would I do this? They're not putting any money into anything. Like they're not putting any effort into, nothing's changed. Why would my rent go up? Right? Like it eliminates some of the questions that'll, I think a lot of the head-to-head combat between tenant and landlord gets erased because you're doing a good job.
That little fight at the end of a lease where you're like, I didn't damage that, and I have a picture somewhere that it was better before at some point. I can't prove that you did or didn't, and you got all this like, I'm taking some of the security deposit. No, you're not. That wasn't my fault, and all that stuff just kind of goes away when it's documented. Not that it's impossible to still have that sort of conflict, but when communication is there regularly and documented regularly, I think it cuts out some of the garbage.
Definitely. And when you stack that type of systematization around kind of management of your property with 2, 3, 4, 5 rentals, again, you're not going to have trouble hitting hours. You're not thinking of ways to stretch random weird acts of trying to hit your hours. No, we're going to group those properties together. You need to hit 100 hours across all 5 properties, and you are running a well-oiled machine at that point. You're scheduling all these on the same day. You're going to property hop for 45 minutes at each one, and you're having great conversations. You're letting your tenants know that you care about the property and that you're maintaining it and that you're improving it in different ways. And it's just doing your job well. That's what it comes down to.
But I'm a business owner. I run a plumbing company. I run an HVAC company. I don't want to do that.
Well, the good thing is, I mean, your spouse's participation does count as well. So
make them do it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Nose codes for who's up this time around. No, but I mean, that is a real advantageous piece of this is like if your spouse has a less demanding schedule during a part of the year or whatever it is, right? Like your spouse can be the one handling this or a combo of the two. You can both put in 50 hours where you're finding different ways to shift the schedule around. If you got busy moments in life and you got kids and you got busy work and you got travel and you got all sorts of stuff, split the hourly workload there. Hit 50 hours on from the two of you on different properties, or if you're grouping properties, go ahead and divide certain properties up. Hey, your spouse is going to take care of these couple. They're going to do the same stuff, and then you're going to go and do the same stuff at these ones. Just a whole lot of different ways to make it manageable and not overbearing. And look, it takes participation. It takes effort. Yes, we're not even going to shy away from that. But guess what? The benefit of it is you get to defer hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. So it's a pretty big benefit for the amount of work that goes into it.
The cost benefit of that versus driving Uber on your evenings, like there's not really a comparison. You just it's a better deal. So better side gig than otherwise.
So another thing we want to touch on is like, what would you include in your log? What would be practical to include when you are logging hours, logging your activities? Keep a spreadsheet. It can be on your phone, keep it in the notes, whatever you need to do to like track it in real time, and then go ahead and put it into like an easy to digest spreadsheet. I think is really the best way to stay organized with it. Don't
try and recreate stuff at the end of the year and frantically try and come up with stuff. This is where the IRS gets they'll tear it apart. You come to an audit and you're like, I did these generic things 12 times in a row. You have the same entry, 10, 12 things in a row. It's just a copy and a paste from the last one at an exact time stamp, exact number of hours, exact time. It just looks dumb. Like you're not gonna. It's going to look like you're trying to get away with something when that's not the point of any of this. The point is to run a successful rental real estate company in addition to what you're doing in a way that like helps you on the tax end too.
Yeah. And our goal with clients is to do a quarterly check-in, almost like an audit of where they are at, hours, material participation, so that we can course correct. Like maybe you're a little light in the beginning and we're like, hey, we need to make sure that we're accurately going to hit this.
You've been keeping track of your YouTube hours and thinking it counts, and we just got to make sure that we're not going to turn that over to the IRS and say I was doing work on these videos. So if you do those, if you not only us, right? If you're working with us, we're going to try and touch base quarterly on those things and just kind of help maintain some structure there. But for yourself, again, setting up a quarterly rhythm of maybe going to the property, but then you're also going to take inventory of what hours you've spent in that quarter and just kind of reassess the log, make sure it's all up to date and good with everything that you've done. And much easier than trying to go back and remember what the last 12 months have looked like. And you've taken shoddy notes in your notes app on your iPhone. And you're trying to piece together what exactly you did, how many hours you spent, and you're just guesstimating just every single time, just get into a rhythm of doing it. And it's not rocket science. Yeah. So a couple of good things, like just to keep track and make sure that you are like specific with what you're saying I've done at the property. I want to list the date. I want to list maybe the start and end time, the amount of hours you took overall, doing the math on that. A description of what was actually done. And again, not just a copy and paste from the last cell, but like what specifically did you do? There was a leaky faucet in the master bathroom and I fixed that while I was there. Like very specific things. I had to make a run to the hardware store to pick up the supplies to fix this thing. And here was my expense associated with that, all of that. So some sort of description. Be as detailed as you can. Another thing would be the address. If you have multiple addresses and you're trying to materially participate in multiple properties individually, this is where it really gets important that you separate out the addresses. But either way, just list the address of the property that you're working at. And then any additional notes that you have that need to be need to be stated, or a memo line almost, with like, hey, this is just a quick tag of what type of thing I was doing there. Maybe you have some other way of tracking things that you just want to keep track of.
Yeah. If it's quick, you got to hit it like that. You don't be afraid to also just like write a quick paragraph on exactly what you were doing there. And,
sure.
Give detail, give real stuff. So yeah,
I think some of this is daunting. If you talk to somebody like, hey, you need to work 2 hours a week in this rental, and like, I don't want to spend 2 hours a week in this rental. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Some of these things you can map out. I think that's one thing that you can do at the start of a year. And one thing we'd help clients with too is what are the things that I can regularly do that will count towards these hours, that I can make sure that I'm making progress throughout the year. I can't always assume that I'm going to have some catastrophic failure. I'm going to need to do some big remodel in the middle of the year. Hopefully we're not spending that much money on the properties and that much time on the properties anyways. So what are the other things that I can do that will count towards those hours? I love the idea of a quarterly check-in, of getting with the tenant and doing a walk through the property, getting eyes out and just making sure that you're touching bases and saying, hey, I care about your time here, and I want to make sure that you're comfortable and this is a good space, a safe space for you to be. And also, I want to make sure that the house is being kept up for you. And it doesn't need to be weird, like, you guys are trashing the house. More like, hey, I just want to make sure that this asset of mine is doing well. Like, maybe it is that I don't want you to be trashing it, but we just don't say it that way. In front of the
it's better to find out that they are trashing it 3 months in, than looking back a year when they go ahead and they didn't make their last 2 rent payments and you're evicting them, or they went dark on you, and you're going to the property and you're like, holy crap, I haven't checked on this all year, and this is terrible. They have ripped things out. They've done all sorts of damage, right? Like, tenants are crazy sometimes. So
missed rent payments, 10,000 in damages. It's not impossible to hit some of those things if you're not checking in.
Right. So again, kind of back to the point, it's like, how do we manage the property effectively and well, so that also you're preventing a lot of this, like, all the bad things that happen in real estate, all the crappy things that you hear about, the nightmare stories, right? Doing this is helpful because you can be proactive and get ahead of a lot of those issues before they ever become bigger issues. Won't fully prevent you from any sort of like risk that you are kind of taking on with real estate, but it definitely sets you up in the right direction. Yeah.
Love that. I think one of the biggest topics here today, again, being accurate, being documenting your time, super important. But again, taking on the mindset of, hey, how can I be the best at what I'm doing here? How can I be the best landlord that this person has ever worked with? How can I be the best homeowner in this situation? How can I run this as the best experience this tenant has had in rental real estate as they've rented? I think it will pay dividends in the future, and that's one way that you can take the reins of how well your investment in that property is going to be. Definitely.
Well, cool. That's material participation, and that's a lot more specifics on how this works out kind of in real life, and how you can apply it, and what you should be thinking through when you're creating a plan for yourself when you're actually implementing a strategy like this. So, awesome.